City of Joburg councillors have held meetings with residents of Region C on the drafted integrated development plan. That plan aims to address various service delivery challenges facing communities. Residents have raised issues or concerns including a lack of proper sanitation, not enough health facilities and water shortages. Let's unpack this for you now. Bring in the city's chair of chairs, that's Lloyd Phillips, as well as Lindokuhle Vellem, who's a researcher at Public Service Accountability Monitor. To both our guests, it's lovely to have you on the program. Thanks very much indeed for your time. Lindokuhle, I wonder if I can begin with you. You know, as we embark on these kind of initiatives, I wonder to what extent you reckon residents even know about the IDP and what the process entails to begin with.
Good morning and thank you. Residents currently, well, it's their plan, but how they interact with the plan, I think that's where there's a discrepancy. They've known about the integrated development planning, but to be prepared for that space and to ask and propose the relevant questions, I think that's the area that we and other organizations have been working in to do civic education around the integrated development planning space, that it is a strategic document that communities can be part of and should be part of, as based in our constitution. So their understanding of what that space is about is somewhat lacking in other areas, because it seems at times they treat it as a wish list space. However, it's a space where they are co-creating with the institution, which will be the metro in the city of Joburg. So it's that co-creation, knowing what's on the table and understanding the information. I think where there might be a gap that exists is the understanding of the information presented and taking forward people's concerns.
Yeah.
And so they're not fully understanding and grasping it because they're not seeing themselves and their needs properly articulated in the document.
All right. I was going to ask why you think there seems to be that gap, but I reckon it's because, as you've just mentioned, people aren't necessarily in a space where they're able to take it on as their own document. And I suppose, Councillor Lloyd, that's where you'd come in. In my mind, you'd act as some kind of facilitator for that kind of civic education to take place.
Yes, absolutely. According to the Municipal Sections Act, Municipal Systems Act, Section 34, the city is required to adopt an integrated development plan over a 5-year period that has to be reviewed on an annual basis. And this is where we actually go on public consultation meetings. You know, we host these regional summits. But I have to say, you know, we've also tried, because we've realized in the past that there are many service delivery issues that surface during the engagement sessions, and we have then now embarked on a system where we put up some kiosks where residents can now take their service delivery issues to these kiosks prior to our engagement, because we really need them to fully engage on the draft IDP, the budget and the tariffs, as well as the rates policy. Despite, you know, having looked at Roodepoort now in the IDP session in Roodepoort, despite the kiosks that we had outside available for residents to access, there was still a number of service delivery issues that was raised within the session, which basically tells us that residents are frustrated. They no longer can tolerate the situations that they are living in. And we have to also take that into consideration and see how we can then realign, particularly on the executive side, their priorities to meet the residents' needs and then have it enshrined in the IDP as the final document.
Yeah. The difficulty, of course, Lindokuhle, is that the more frustrated residents get, the more disillusioned they become in processes like this, the less involved they become, and the less work can be done through these particular mechanisms. It becomes the slippery slope where things get worse if they are ever to get better. I wonder whether you reckon we're winning the fight on that score, convincing people that it's worth taking part in these processes because it will ultimately lead to a change in their material conditions.
We are part of a project called Action for Accountability, where we are taking residents through the IDP process and how to engage with the documents. And I think where it lacks most is that the engagement happens. It's a platform that is there. That is it's there for communities to participate in. However, their participation is not legitimized because they're not expressing what is in the document, or they don't see their needs in the document. So now when you get to that space where you've had the interaction with the document before the public hearings, and you understand the contents of it. You understand your role in terms of this is a strategic document that is for the whole city. And this is our role in terms of how do we prioritize our needs, because our needs are endless. And it's in that position where when we go to these IDPs, are our priorities, do we see them reflected in the budget of the municipality? So I think that conversation between the IDP draft, the final IDP, and the budgeting, that's when then people do not see their priorities within the budget. Because even if they prioritize them within the IDP space, how are they reflected when it's time to budget and implement those projects? So in terms of understanding, yes, there's a long way to go because people just think that the space is a wish list space. However, it's a space that we can interact and co-create. And it's coming to understand that it won't all come today. But with the funds that are available, this is what is possible. But we need to start people need to start dotting the lines. That I went to the IDP, the review. I've seen the final IDP document, and this is the budget. This is what we brought up as the community of Findtown, of the community of Lenasia. Is it reflected then in how the municipality is planning to spend the money for that financial year? And those are the questions that community fundamentally need to have answered. And they're just not making those links. It's this top-down document that gets to them, and they're not able to filter through what their deepest concerns are. Issues of bridges where their children walk to school. It's dilapidated, it's falling apart, but those things are not taken into consideration. Therefore, they feel it's a useless space to be part of. However, it is where the change is going to come, because outside of that, outside of the legislated spaces, is where then we start breeding chaos and not understanding what is meant for us to be part of.
Right. Speaking about chaos, Councillor Lloyd, it'd be completely remiss of us not to reflect on the turbulence that have taken place in multiple councils, including our own here in Johannesburg. To what extent do you reckon that affects the perception, bleeds into a trust deficit, and makes this completely dysfunctional, this process of trying to engage with communities so that they're part of this IDP process?
Yes, look, we have seen, particularly around the metros within Gauteng, the instability, and that is largely because these metros don't have there's no particular party or single party that has an outright majority, and we take it that is the mandate from the voters that we've received, and it basically coerces us into finding each other and working together with the common goal of service delivery being at the center of it. However, that is not the understanding on the ground. We, as different political parties, I represent the Good Party, and as different political parties, we're in a hung municipality. We have to put our differences aside and try to find each other in the interest of the residents of the city. However, on the ground, there are frustrations that the political atmosphere might then hamper this process of the IDP. And I would like to assure residents that the changes in the political administration has got no bearing on the IDP, as it is a legislated process. While we politicians argue it out, we have the administration running the process as I've mentioned, that it is a 5-year process that gets reviewed on an annual basis. What also leads to the frustration, you would find that there are situations like, for example, in Findtown, we had our speaker was presiding over the IDP session, consultation session in Finetown. And because there is no current councillor in Ward 7, Finetown in particular, there was a lot of frustrations raised. And it is up to us to ensure that what is enshrined in the IDP, or in the final draft, or let's say the approved draft, we deliver on that. Because really the frustration is that most of these projects don't see the light of day. And we would like to assure residents that although it's not an overnight process, we are doing the best that we can within that space. And I'd also like to just disagree with Lindokuhle in saying that it is a top-to-bottom approach. In fact, it is the other way around. We commenced this process with our community-based planning, and that is where we solicit inputs into the draft. It is unfortunate that the city, particularly the city of Johannesburg, we do have a bit of a financial situation that we are still working on. So we won't necessarily be able to meet all of the inputs during the draft, but we send it through a process of analysis where we then determine by way of the number of inputs towards a specific priority. And that is what we prioritize and that we bring back in the form of a draft. That is where we are currently for the community to engage.
Sure.
But also like Lindokuhle has indicated that a lot of education still needs to be done around active participation in the strategic document. This is a combined document where the city and the residents are actually supposed to find each other and to ensure that what is enshrined in this document actually sees the light of day. And it
right, Councillor Lloyd, I'm going to have to come in there. Thank you. Yeah, I think your point is well made. And to be fair, I think Lindokuhle was saying residents see it as a top-down approach, not that that's actually how the process unfolds. But that's where we're going to have to leave it for today. It's an incredibly important story. We typically have these huge macro conversations, but every now and again it's important to hone in on how they manifest on the ground, so to speak. But for now, Lindokuhle Vellem and Lloyd Phillips, it's great to have you on. Thanks for your time.